guns and white supremacy. Published last week, it links America's veterans to hate groups, and it has angered vets and Americans across the country. We did some digging into who wrote this piece and why. Trace Gallagher picks up the story from there from our West Coast Bureau. Trace?
And Megan, even before Kathleen Belew started teaching history at Northwestern University, she was actively writing and speaking about what she calls the relationship between military veterans and racism. Her book, which is not yet released, is called Bring the War Home: Vietnam Vets Igniting the Racial Right. She has spoken many times about the same subject, talks with titles like, quote, Race, Ethnicity, and the Right, and, quoting again, Theaters of War, Paramilitaries, Mercenaries, and the Racist Right from Vietnam to Oklahoma City. Here's some of what she said. Listen.
I argue that between 1975 and 1995, disparate Klan, Nazi, Christian identity, militia, and other white separatist groups used a Vietnam War script to unite in a cohesive racist right movement with a stunning new capacity for violence.
The heat she's getting now from military and others is over her New York Times editorial, where she called up and cited a 2009 report from the Department of Homeland Security that linked military vets returning from combat to a surge in membership in the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist groups. In 2009, after Fox News questioned that report and the American Legion and conservative lawmakers openly challenged it, DHS shelved it, pulling it off its website. But Kathleen Belew now argues that last week's shooting at two Jewish-affiliated centers, allegedly by a white supremacist military vet, proves the threat that DHS brought up in 2009 was real, and that has military groups up in arms. We tried to reach out to Kathleen Belew. She did not get back to us. Megan.
Trace, thank you. Joining me now, Congressman Michael Grimm, who's a Marine combat veteran, and Louis Celli, who's the legislative director for the American Legion. Gentlemen, thank you both so much for being here. Let me start with you, Representative Grimm. Your reaction to Ms. Belew as we get a closer look at who this woman is.
I'm going to start with a question. How can someone that is apparently so well educated be so darn ignorant? This is one of the most outrageous and ignorant things I've ever seen written, even for the New York Times, which nothing, surprises me with what they write. But this, you shouldn't even be allowed to use this under your birdcage. It is disgraceful, it is shameful, and I'll tell you what, if Ms. Belew has such a problem with our veterans, maybe she should live in a country that doesn't provide the security and the liberty and the freedom that each and every one of our veterans provide each and every day. Maybe that's what she should do.
It looks like she's devoted the majority of her professional career to studying this link she perceives between veterans and hate groups. And boy, she's written many, many articles on it, Louis. She believes, with examples like Timothy McVeigh and this guy in Kansas last week, that there's a strong link, I suppose, between vets returning from war. She says war does not end on the battlefield.
Megan, you bring up an excellent point. The American Legion is extremely concerned that Ms. Belew is now a professor at Northwestern University, and we wonder what type of education our veterans are looking forward to when they do transition back from war and they decide that they want to go ahead and get an education. Is this what they're looking forward to? I don't think they're going to be looking forward to studying at Northwestern, I can tell you that.
I mean, she cites those two examples. How many veterans do we have in this country right now, Louis?
We have over 23 million veterans, and since since 1923, we've had over 42 million veterans, and to point out 2 or 3 of them who have conducted bad deeds is really disingenuous at the very least.
You know, the thing is, though, Congressman Grimm, she points to this 2009 Department of Homeland Security report, as Trace mentioned. And in that report, they do provide a linkage. They talk about how veterans returning home from war are more susceptible to, indoctrination by these groups. But they ultimately had to pull that under criticism. She nonetheless believes the report as it was first offered.
Well, from all the research that we've looked at, that report was flawed from the beginning. It didn't provide any real data, any real research. So I think that the report itself is flawed. But look, let's look at facts. How many of our Annapolis graduates, our West Point graduates, are running the biggest companies in the world? How many of the contributions of our veterans have changed the world for the better? The number is so exponentially great. Are there always going to be one rotten apple in a bunch? Of course. When you recruited for Vietnam, first of all, there was a draft. So is it possible that we drafted one or two that were hate mongers before they were ever in the military? Of course. So this correlation is absolutely ridiculous. In fact, I think the statistics show quite the opposite of what she's charging. I think if you look overall, most of those that, like myself, who served in combat with the United States Marine Corps, the last thing we want to do would be hate mongers, because when I was trained with blacks, Latins, everything you can ever imagine, and we put our faith and our lives in each other's hands. We developed such a respect for each other. There is no hatred, at least in the Marine Corps I served in.
Let me ask you, Louis, because you know there's a question about whether the New York Times should say something about this. Should, if not apologize, and I know the veterans groups are asking for that, then maybe the public editor can at least give voice to the feedback they've received on it, or something to acknowledge the considerable distress this has caused many, many veterans. We've heard from a lot of them, and a lot of representatives saying that they're hearing about it too. What harm, if any, does this one woman's opinion do?
Well, Meghan, that's an excellent question. And the truth is, it's such a poorly researched paper that it's actually reckless. And what's going to happen now to veterans who want to seek treatment for PTSD or who are trying to get employed, and now there'll be a bias against them because of reckless articles such as this. That's the damage right there.
Do you think that there would be a greater outcry, Congressman Grimm, if she had written an article saying Muslims attacked us on 9/11, therefore Muslims need to be scrutinized, Muslims are the ones we need to worry about? Because we've had a lot of people make that claim, and boy, they've been publicly excoriated. But the outcry outside of the veteran community has perhaps not been as loud when you make that sort of a claim about the men and women who defend this country.
I don't think there's any question, Meghan. I think you're 100% right. If we targeted a specific group like Muslims as opposed to veterans, the outcry across this country would be outrageous. The left, the far left would be putting together marches, and they would be out protesting everywhere you can imagine. But because it's our men and women in uniform, the New York Times can get away with it. And it's shameful.
And would the Times have published that?
Oh, I don't think there's no way whatsoever would they have published that. If you would have just taken out veterans and put in Muslims and used 9/11, there's no way they would have published that. But you know what? For the New York Times, the veterans are an easy target. And the truth is, there is a lot of veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress, and articles like this are going to do exactly that. They're going to dissuade them from seeking the treatment that they need.
Louis, have you heard anything from the Times on your demand for an apology?
We haven't heard a peep from them. And I'll tell you, it really is, it's scandalous, the fact that they haven't said anything about this yet. And it's really a shame, because it's veterans now that are suffering. Veterans are liberators. They are not oppressors. Veterans have spent their entire career liberating peoples. We don't oppress, we liberate.
Gentlemen, thank you both for being here, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.